Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be ranking all the classics I read in 2025 from worst to best. This one's going to be a little bit controversial. There are a lot of classics that I didn't really like. There's 9 books here. One of them, I don't know if it would be considered a classic. I've thrown it into the mix because I have some opinions. Please keep in mind that these are just my opinions. Obviously, all of these are classics for a reason, and they're a lot of people's favorites. Before I start, I want to say please make sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing all sorts of reading and writing videos throughout the year and some video essays and vlogs here and there, and I'm also hoping to reach 1,000 subscribers before the summer. Okay, so the first book on this list, number 9, and the worst classic that I read this year. This is actually the last book that I read in 2025, so not a good way to end the year. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I went into this with such high expectations. I hadn't heard anyone speak badly about it. Everyone just acknowledged it as a really good classic, a poetic book, a very symbolic book. I went into it thinking I would really like it. I didn't. It was horrible. So The Bell Jar is about a woman, Esther, who has an internship at a New York fashion magazine. However, when she's there, she finds that she's unable and doesn't want to do all of the fun things that she imagined doing when she was in New York. So we're following her through this depression and after it. I went in not really knowing what the premise was, but as I was reading, I thought it would be something like The Catcher in the Rye, which I really liked. For one, the writing felt very flat to me. It felt easy to read, but not in a good way. It just felt like someone was talking to you with little effort, which is very strange because Plath is a poet most of the time. I think this is the only novel she wrote, so you'd think that writing and the prose would be her specialty. The writing is very lazy and honestly quite boring. The actual plot and story itself just feels very cyclical and pointless, and I know that it's meant to display how depression can often feel like that. The characters are really unjustified and frankly very annoying and at times revolting. They're all very privileged and act like it, but then they all just feel sorry for themselves, especially the main character. The only good thing about this was a few quotes that I've tabbed. Obviously the fig tree quote, which was the only thing I knew about the Bell Jar before going into it, so I had high expectations and I thought the way that it ended was poignant, but other than that, everything was just lazy, horrible, cyclical. If this was a short story, it might have done well. Another blaringly horrible thing about The Bell Jar is the overt racism. It is very blaring and it just sticks out like a sore thumb. It's not even blended into the background, which wouldn't make it okay, but I mean, when I read classics, I can understand that it's set in a completely different era and context, and there's going to be some aspects and ideas and even thoughts that the characters have that I would find a little bit odd. But it's very difficult to ignore here, and it's quite uncomfortable. For example, she describes how she looks in the mirror and she looks like an ugly, yellow-faced Chinese woman. And then her friend is recommending her to a man, and he's from Peru, I think. And she goes, no, they're short and stocky and ugly. And then in the book, he turns out to be a very aggressive rapist dancing to Latina music. I'm sorry, is this Despicable Me? And then another time, there was a black, I think, nurse who was bringing in her food for her when she's at the hospital, and she was annoyed that he got her 2 different kinds of beans, and she's describing how kind of describes him making like animal-like noises, and then she literally kicks him in the leg for no reason. I'm not even kidding, guys. Obviously, because it's a modern book, it feels a bit more fresh. That's another thing. The writing was very modern in a way I didn't expect. I thought it would be a little bit more poetic and grounded. It just wasn't. The racism just really cemented how both the character and Sylvia Plath were just privileged women who were complaining about their own lives in very, honestly, eye-rolling ways. I was rolling my eyes so much when I was reading this. Didn't like it. Could have been a short story, could have been a poem. Writing was horrible, characters are horrible, ideas are horrible. There's just a few good quotes and the ending was poignant. Would not recommend this to anybody at all. And it just, from now on, anytime someone says that they love this book or it was one of their favorites and it was so deep, I'm just gonna kind of side-eye you. It feels a little bit performative. Horrible. I gave it 1 star. The next book on this list and the second worst classic that I read in 2025 was Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I don't know if this is considered a classic, but I think a lot of people would consider it a modern classic. This is a dystopia, and it is about a world where human clones are made in order to be organ donors for real humans. The premise is obviously very interesting and very promising, but the book was incredibly disappointing. I read this because I needed to read it for school to study, but I think I still would have been interested in the premise otherwise. It is very, very boring. If you want to know what happens in Never Let Me Go, it is literally just a premise. It's just clones, and we're following the clones throughout their lives as they're being told and taught that they are going to become organ donors when they're older. There's a lot of good symbolism in here. I think studying it has obviously helped me recognize the depth, but generally it is very boring. It's meant to be unconventional as a dystopia because there's no kind of resistance to the systems, and we don't really get to know the systems well, and that's meant to be symbolic, but it made it very difficult to read and get into. Much too long, much too useless. The characters were very, very annoying. Kathy is honestly like a wet cloth. I'm not even kidding. She's so boring. She does nothing whatsoever. Ruth is obviously just annoying. I hate that girl. Tommy was the only tolerable character, but even he was just increasingly annoying. There was nothing worthwhile in the story. If you asked me what happens throughout this book, I wouldn't know what to say. Nothing happens in here. Don't read it. It's kind of a useless book, and I can understand what Ishiguro's intention was, and obviously as I'm studying it and I'm looking into the symbolisms of everything, I can understand the depth to it, but it's just not the kind of book that you want to read. Wouldn't recommend. Next on this list, third worst classic that I read in 2025 was Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is the first Austen book I've been able to finish, so hooray for that. I have 4 Austen books in my bookshelves. There's Persuasion, Pride and Prejudice, Sanditon, and Emma. Don't know why I have all of them because I don't like Jane Austen's writing. I tried reading Pride and Prejudice, I tried reading Emma. I can just never get into her writing. I did like the premise of Persuasion, which is why I picked it up. So Persuasion is about a woman who was persuaded years back to reject the man that she did want to marry, and years later they're meeting again. It was sweet. There were a lot of moments and emotions that felt very real. Obviously the famous letter in the end was very good and honestly the best thing about this book, but my god, was this boring. It was an absolute snooze fest. Nothing happens throughout the whole book. Kind of like my same complaint for Never Let Me Go. If you want to know what happens in Persuasion, it is literally just that a woman meets with the man that she rejected years ago, and nothing else of merit happens. There's a lot of useless storylines and scenes here, and for a book and story that has such little in it, you'd expect the writing to make up for it, but it doesn't. Honestly, Jane Austen's writing feels like reading a dictionary. I read pages upon pages of Love and Farming and Anna Karenina, and I found that miles more entertaining than Jane Austen's writing. The useless scenes and depictions that Jane Austen presents of just very useless going-ons in society just feel like a manifestation of the sloths from Zootopia. If you like romance and you have the patience and temperament to read boring classic writing, then you should pick this up, but otherwise don't even try. I am excited to read some of her other books because I don't know the premises of those at all, so at least there'll be a little bit of a surprise there. Next on this list is Dead Poet Society by N.H. Kleinbaum. So this is the book version of the movie, but I think it was written after the movie and just based on one of the early drafts of Dead Poet Society, and you can definitely tell. I haven't watched the movie yet, but I think I will enjoy it, probably more than the book. So Dead Poet Society is about this group of boys in an academy who get a new English teacher, and they find that he is very passionate and he's not like a lot of the strict teachers they have. And together they revive an old society, the Dead Poet Society, where they're all very passionate and they discuss literature. The premise of a boarding school with a group of students kind of forming a secret society is very similar to the main framing of the novel that I'm writing. I think this book is quite similar to The Catcher in the Rye, though I did prefer The Catcher in the Rye quite a bit more. I like that the characters had some sort of depth. Generally though, I did feel like it was quite unmemorable. Obviously the ending is quite memorable, and it's honestly one of the only things I remember from this book. The writing is the main thing that brought this down for me. Like I said, it was based on a script. You don't really get into it, if that makes sense. It's written very stoically and factually, and whenever some kind of metaphor or flowery language is attempted, it feels very forced and awkward, and it kind of pulls you out of it. Next, and this is the last book that I'm leaning towards not liking, is Taming of the Shrew by William Shakespeare. The Taming of the Shrew is one of Shakespeare's few comedies, and it's one of his most unpopular plays. Rightfully so. Taming of the Shrew is basically about these two sisters, Bianca and Catherine. Bianca is the obedient, stereotypical woman of the time, and then Catherine is meant to be the shrew of the story. She's outspoken, a little bit aggressive, she doesn't like men. Bianca and Catherine's dad says Catherine needs to get married before Bianca because she's the eldest. So all of Bianca's many suitors are really upset, and the story kind of follows the man who marries Catherine and how he pains her by starving her. Yeah, I wasn't a fan. It's really short, there isn't really a world to go into, and it felt very disappointing for the level that I know Shakespeare is at. There's really three main themes: gender, appearance versus reality, and reputation. The only reason I read it again is because I'm studying it in school, and I'm able to see how there is a lot of rich quotes and symbolism for these three main themes, but then I'm also realizing that there really isn't much beyond that. It's kind of just a comic, satire, exaggerated representation of gender norms and marriage at the time. Disappointed in Shakespeare with this. I think it's still worth a read. All of Shakespeare's worth a read, but there isn't really much in this. I could have studied King Lear or Hamlet instead, which makes me want to cry, but my teacher picked Taming of the Shrew because it's the shortest. Okay, now we are moving on to the classics I actually enjoyed, and the lowest on this list is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. This is a series of letters by Rainer to a young poet who compiled the letters and published them. I really like the advice here. The writing feels very gentle and purposeful. I did think, obviously, because Rainer did not know that these were going to be published and we only get Rainer's side of the letters, feels a little incomplete. The way it stands alone as a book obviously is kind of bought down by that. This is just the kind of thing that I would recommend you read one or two letters of every once in a while reading another main book. But there were some really lovely quotes in here. I did some TikToks a while back about my favorite quotes. We did get one of Franz's poems that he sent to Rainer. I'm going to read the last stanza because I really liked it. Love then is what my hands attempt to grasp, because I want to say a prayer whose sounds my burning mouth, my lips cannot bring forth. I think as a reader it would make you appreciate the books you're reading a lot more and might even motivate you to write, and as a writer it reminds you how special the craft is. Okay, we're at the top three classics and I'm really stuck between second and third place. Okay, third of the top three classics of 2025 is The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. So this is about the death of Ivan Ilyich. So we start by seeing Ivan Ilyич's business friends reacting to his death, and then it moves on to a narrative of Ivan Ilyich. It's the second Tolstoy novel I read. The first was Anna Karenina, which is my all-time favorite classic, so I went into this with pretty high hopes and it did not disappoint. There's a lot of depth and meaning in here. The story itself obviously is not that twisty or plotty, but I still feel like he explores a lot of things about life and death very well. There's a lot of exploration of human psychology as well. I thought it was very ironic and interesting the way he described people's reaction to his death, and basically everyone around him has a selfish reaction. The other story in here was Three Deaths, which I also really liked. I really liked the ending of this. Number 2, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I didn't actually realize I enjoyed this so much until I was putting these in a ranking order. Frankenstein, if you didn't know, is about a scientist, Victor Frankenstein, who puts together different pieces of corpses and then brings it to life. Obviously, the premise and story is very iconic and gothic and interesting. There's a lot of meaning to go into. This book does take a bit of effort to read. Every quote is significant. We're studying this as well. We're comparing it to Never Let Me Go. I obviously prefer this a lot more, and I really like the ideas that are explored about moral responsibility, where it comes from, and how we're meant to honor it. The ending was a bit disappointing. There is also a little bit of racism in here. Last but definitely not least, the best classic that I read in 2025 was Beast in the Shadows by Edogawa Rampo. I love this. This is definitely going to be one of my new favorite books generally. I went into this with practically zero expectations. I picked it up randomly when I was in the store. I wasn't even book shopping, and I haven't heard anyone talking about it, but it was amazing. It is about a crime novelist who turns into a detective to protect the woman he loves because she says she's being stalked by her ex-lover, and it is amazing. Not only is the plot and storyline so interesting, you genuinely want to know what's going to happen next, but the actual depth and meaning and psychology that went into this is so interesting. I read this in one sitting. It's very short. It's less than 100 pages. Anytime you feel like you know what's going to happen next, and then the detective or our narrator predicts the same thing, you think you're right, but then there's another twist and another and another and another. I thought the ending was amazing, like the last 2 pages and kind of what it suggests. It feels like all of the characters are on a witch trial and you don't know who the beast in the shadows is, and you almost feel like you're the beast in the shadows eventually. Really well written. It suffered the way all short novels do, in the sense that you don't really get to know the characters. I don't remember any of the characters' names. There's not much of a world to get into. I gave it 4.5 stars, which is amazing for me, by the way. I'm a very harsh rater. I can count the number of books I gave 5 stars on one hand. That is it for today's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, these were just my opinions. Let me know what your best and worst classics or just books that you read in 2025 were, and I will see you guys next week. Clean bomb. That is an odd name.